Yeah, right. Sorry.
Put the hammer down.
I'd like to bring this meeting to order. April 18th, 2022, Southern Shores Planning Board. Y'all join me in pledge of allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Okay. Could I get a motion to approve tonight's agenda as written?
So moved.
Thank you, Linda.
I'll second it.
Thank you, Tony. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? None seen? Okay. The minutes, anybody have any corrections on the March 21st minutes? I got a couple little typo things there, but one would be on page 2, line 70, where it says town staff recommends approval. It has no objections to the use of a type B buffer, but I would probably strike we in that sentence. I don't think that would be too applicable there. And then I have, let's see. On page 8, line 343, Wes, I would probably put Senate Bill 160D there for clarity. It may have popped up somewhere else, I just didn't see it, but
Which line was that? I'm sorry. Page 8.
yeah, page 8, line 343.
And refer to, would you say Senate Bill?
Yeah, I would just say Senate Bill 160D or however we've been calling that out, but
NCGS 160.
yeah.
Okay, I got you.
Yeah. Other than that, that's all I found. Anybody? Okay. Could I get a motion to approve those minutes?
I'll motion to approve the planning board minutes for March 21st, 2022.
Second.
Thank you, Linda. All in favor? Aye. Opposed? None seen? Okay. On the agenda is public comment. Anybody want to sign up, want to talk? Now's your chance. Okay, none seen. We're going to go to old business, and I'm going to ask our town planner to come up and speak to ZTA 2202 first, and then the applicant will follow. So, Wes, can you tell us why we're here tonight?
Yes, sir. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Good evening, members of the board. The first item on your agenda for business is ZTA-22-02. The applicant is Gene Guy LLC. The applicant's representative is Michael Strader with Quibble and Associates. The requested action is amendment of the town zoning ordinance by amending section 36-207C General Commercial District. The applicant is proposing this ZTA to amend section 36-207 to allow the group development of commercial and residential buildings as a conditional use in the C General Commercial Zoning District. The use would be permitted through the issuance of a conditional use permit or a special use permit per 160D general statutes. Section 36-207 currently allows the group development of commercial buildings only. Examples would be the Marketplace and Southern Shores Crossing group developments. Section 36-207 also currently allows residential uses, including detached single-family dwellings, two-family dwellings, multifamily dwellings, and accessory buildings. But currently, such uses would be limited to only one principal building and its customary accessory building on any lot. If this ZTA was approved, the ZTA would allow group developments consisting of multiple principal, commercial, and residential buildings, subject to the following requirements that were also proposed with the language. A, minimum size of any building shall be 2,500 square feet. That carries forward from the current group development language requirements. B, all buildings constructed within 35 feet of another building within the development are to be connected by a breezeway or covered walkway. That is also in the current group development requirements. C, lot shall have frontage along US Highway 158. D, lot shall be serviced by an existing wastewater treatment facility. And E, residential density shall be limited to RS8 district allowances as established within section 36-203A. The following properties could potentially, given those requirements and specific criteria, the following properties could potentially meet the proposed requirements for group developments consisting of commercial and residential buildings. And they are 5391 North Virginia Dare Trail. That's the property owned by the Stones. 7.9 acres over here, kind of behind where Pizza Stop and Tropical Smoothie are located. 5500 North Croatan Highway, that is the Marketplace. 5355 North Croatan Highway, the Southern Shores Realty Maintenance property. And then lastly, 6195 North Croatan Highway, which is owned by the applicant. With respects to the town's land use plan that is applicable to the ZTA is policy 2. And with respect to town staff's recommendation, during your consideration, questions and discussions should mainly focus on the ZTA and not on a potential site plan for the proposed use. Policy 2 of the town's land use plan establishes the commercial district is a small district for convenience shopping and services. In addition to policy 2 of the land use plan, it also establishes that incompatible uses in the commercial area are limited to residential low density, educational, and conservation activities. Since commercial and residential group developments will most likely consist of high-density residential development mixed with commercial development, town staff has determined that the proposed amendments are consistent with the town's currently adopted land use plan, and town staff recommends that the planning board recommend approval of the application to the town council. A copy of the staff report, as well as the language, was included in your packets. There were there were a few revisions made to this ZTA, so I just want to make sure everybody has in front of them the correct version, which is on page 1 in the top or near the top right corner, ZTA 2202 41422. That concludes my staff report, Mr. Chairman. If y'all have questions, I can answer them now, or I can wait till later, or however you all want to do it.
I think we'll move on to the applicant now, and then we'll have a question and answer
Yes, sir.
session. So would the applicant come forward, please?
Hello, good afternoon. My name is Sumit Gupta, representing the applicant. I appreciate your time and consideration today of our request. The goal of this text amendment is what I feel to allow some better development options within the town in the general commercial district. Currently, the commercial district allows for group development, which consists of entirely commercial buildings. Or you can do residential development only, and you have to do it as one large building, and there is no current density cap on it, on the number of residential units. We believe this text amendment addresses some of these concerns and creates an option to do both commercial and residential in under one parcel as a group development. This would allow a developer not being forced to do one large residential building. It allows you to do a mixed use, and it also adds a density cap on the residential. We've met with the town representatives a few times and have discussed this particular request. We have further, one concern with any text amendment is obviously the impact townwide. And we've worked on this to really minimize the impact. It's obviously limited to commercial districts, but it's further limited, as we're proposing, that the parcel must have road frontage on Highway 158. It must have access to existing wastewater facility. And the town staff supports this, and we feel this is a text amendment that is good for the town. I'm here to answer any questions.
Board, jump in. Mr. Gupta I'm going to ask him to stay away from specifics, which we've talked about, and deal with the ZTA as presented. We all know where the property is, and but that doesn't really enter into what we're doing up here tonight. We're simply here to address the ZTA as it's presented by the applicant and move forward with any recommendation that we may have to the town. So keeping it in that spirit, I would say floor is open to Mr. Gupta.
I got a question. How big is the parcel?
This text amendment is a general text amendment townwide.
Right.
The property that we own in Southern Shores is about roughly 5.25 to 5.5 gross acres property.
And the residential density specified in section 36203 is how many units?
Under the RS8, it's 8 units per net acre. So taking away it goes only to the uplands.
It goes only to what?
The 8 units per acre multiplied by the total number of upland acres.
So how much is that? How much is that?
The property that we own in Southern Shores, we have a total acreage upland about 4.5 acres or so.
You said you did this because you know it's going to impact. That's your words. How's it going to impact? Give me the positive and the negative aspects of this ZTA on the impact, both positive and negative.
Sure. So currently, if we were to develop a commercial district parcel, there is no density cap, and it's the town ordinance requires it to be one building, not multiple buildings. So a development option right now would be, and there's no density cap. So the property that we own in Southern Shores currently, we could get a lot more than 8 units per acre on there. And it would have to be one large building currently. And we could not mix commercial on that property if we did residential. If we did commercial, we couldn't put residential on that property. So with this ZTA, it would allow a property such as that, or any properties that would meet this criteria, to do smaller residential buildings, mix them with commercial buildings as well, and there would be a limit on the residential density, which my feelings are would be positive.
That's now the negative. I asked a positive, and you did an impact study. So
So,
you had to come up with negatives.
so the negatives from this, from the ZTA?
Mhm.
I guess the negative somebody could see is that you can mix commercial and residential. Right now, you can only do one or the other. So if the town's desire was not to have true mixed use, then that could be considered a negative.
How would this benefit the citizens of the town? That's what I'm concerned with. And how do the citizens of Southern Shores benefit in any way, shape, or form by changing the ZTA to residential and commercial? And you're doing it for the whole, for all of the commercial properties, not just one. Why would you do it for all of them and not ask for a variance for this one? Why did you go that route?
We never considered the variance option. Was even an option, I guess. So there is some limitations. It does impact the commercial district, but with being on the highway frontage and having access to an existing wastewater, it does heavily limit the parcels that are impacted by this. I believe Wes had counted 4 parcels this could potentially impact. Currently, because the property that we happen to own is one of the only ones with a wastewater plant, that would be the only one that would impact right now. But theoretically, the other 3 parcels that Wes named could add a wastewater plant down the road.
And I'll go back to my question. Why did you include all the properties? Wes named 4 properties. That's all of the commercial properties. So by saying 4, you're saying all. So why did you name all of the commercial properties? Was there a plan down the road for something else?
No, no plan. I'm not sure if we could have obtained a variance. This is something maybe Wes can answer for this particular property from the zoning side. My understanding is that to make this change, we would have to go through this particular process. And I completely understand your point about impacting all the properties, and that's where we've tried to limit it. Essentially, right now, with the existing wastewater plant, it would essentially impact the property that we own. You also mentioned what benefit to the Southern Shores. I guess that's a matter of perspective, but this is limiting. Currently, there is no density limitation in the commercial district for residential. So this does place a density limitation similar to RS8, which I feel is a positive. And it allows you to not build one large building because there's no size limitation either. So it allows a developer to do smaller buildings. And again, mix them with commercial buildings. Our plan would be on the property, a commercial district property of the one we own right now would, if we were given the option to do residential or commercial, we would do residential. And if we did residential, we couldn't do commercial. And highway frontage property, some would say it would make sense to do commercial as well. So this would allow to do a mixed use.
owns the wastewater plant?
We own the wastewater plant.
And what is the status of the wastewater plant with the state? Any notice of violations, recent, how do they rate it?
There was a notice of violation. We're working with the agencies. It's an old plant. We just signed a contract. Spend quite a bit of money, over $500,000 to substantially replace the majority of the wastewater plant. We're working with the agencies right now to take it off of an emergency operations.
They're on they're under some kind of,
Yes, it was on emergency operations before we took ownership of it. The wastewater plant's in bad condition, but this is something we've been working on, and now we have, worked through. We have to first update the plant, and at that point, then it would come off the emergency operation.
so can you move forward on something like this with the wastewater plant and that status with the state?
I believe so. Yes, sir. This is a text amendment. It's legislative. It's not applying to a site plan or associated with any proposed physical development.
Anything, Wes, that would be a situational problem with a generic wastewater plant would have to be addressed when the zoning permit was applied for, right?
Either a site plan or a zoning permit. Yes, sir.
So I guess, your concern is valid, but it's not really pertaining to what we're looking at as far as this ZTA. I think they wouldn't be able to get any type of site plan, anybody, or zoning plan before a problem with a wastewater treatment plant would be remedied up to, is it state level, Wes?
The state oversees and
Right.
yes, sir, is the regulatory agency, NCDEQ.
Wes, what is the lot coverage percentage for a commercial area?
Commercial is 60%. For group developments, it's up to 67% if permeable pavement is used.
Okay, so as far as density, there is a limit. You said there was no limit for a density, and it is covered by 60% or 67 if you use
Well, wait,
Well,
that's
that-
40% for
residential. Yeah,
in that parcel.
It's
Yeah.
40% if they wanted to do just residential. If it's it would be treated as if it were in the RS8 district. The 60% lot coverage or 67% lot coverage is not the same thing as density. Density is what they're proposing, 8 dwelling units per acre. Lot coverage is what it is, lot coverage. So they're two separate things,
So what
density
is
and
the-
lot coverage.
What is the lot coverage for what's being proposed?
For group developments, it's 60% or 67% if permeable pavement is used. Similar to the marketplace, the site plan that was approved there. They proposed to use permeable pavement up to I think it's in excess of 5% of the total lot area or of the total lot coverage. If they do that, then they can have a 67%.
So Wes, if it was all residential on a large tract of land rather than doing group development commercially, if it was all residential, what would be the lot coverage?
40%.
I believe the ordinance says it's 40%.
So how do we blend 40% lot coverage for residential into up to 67% lot coverage in commercial?
I don't understand the question. How do we blend?
Well, we would revert back to the RS8.
If they were doing residential development only, the ordinance says that they follow the dimensional requirements of the RS8 district.
Which it is 40%.
Correct.
For
But it's gotta be
residential.
mixed.
For
So
residential.
what I'm asking is, if you've got, for instance, a residential situation and then a commercial situation and then another commercial situation and then a residential situation, bang, bang, bang. The two residential situations, do they have to adhere to the 40% lot coverage or the 67%? Because that makes
They could be,
a pretty good,
they would be subject to the requirements for group developments. They are proposing a group development of commercial and residential buildings. Group developments, 60% or 67% with permeable pavement.
You're talking about in the commercial zone.
Correct.
And in the commercial zone, there's a reference to if you are developing residential in a commercial zone, you follow the RSA.
Correct. That would be the residential uses. This is a group development. This is a new use, what's being proposed. Group development of commercial and residential buildings.
well, it's a group development if it's commercial, but I mean, if we're calling a spade, this is a mixed use development, right?
I did not write the text amendment.
I know.
So,
But it is, I mean, it's certainly mixed use of a group development. So it is mixed, residential mixed with commercial.
Yeah.
I would think that lot coverage, if it was residential and it's 40%, we're giving away 27% of lot coverage to be used in a residential setting.
Which would create,
That's
yeah.
just a question. I mean, any ideas on, how that would evolve into what in essence we are creating is a mixed use ZTA?
you all can certainly recommend approval or denial of what's proposed, or you could offer suggestions to the applicant that he may or may not accept.
Okay. Anybody else have any comment about that particular, John?
Well, if this is a good idea, why is it being restricted to lots that have an existing wastewater treatment facility?
The idea was to heavily limit this right here. There's always a concern that text amendments are town-wide and they impact every commercial property in the town. It was just an effort to limit the properties currently that would be impacted by this.
What's the,
It appears that you're limiting this to only your property. The marketplace is maxed out on coverage. The property that's owned by Southern Shores Realty and the Stone family does not have an existing wastewater treatment facility. So it appears that this is limiting it just to your property. What about the commercial lots in Martins Point? Should they be able to do this? Should other commercial properties be able to do this? It's coming down to, looks like one lot, one parcel.
force main? If the plant has capacity, you could run a force main from these other properties down to that plant. I don't know what it's rated for.
But I mean, why not say septic? Why, I don't get why this is in here. You mentioned it limiting things, but it seems to be excluding virtually every piece of property other than yours.
Yes, currently so. And this was just based on conversations with the staff and their concern about how much this property can impact. And we consciously try to limit that impact.
And I understand from your point of view why, you would want to do this, but from a planning perspective, it just seems very unfair to all the other commercial properties. And it also, when, they were talking about lot coverage, it makes it where, but currently, if somebody had a residential development in the commercial area that's 40% lot coverage, Now they could go and put up a produce stand, call it mixed use, and suddenly the 40% goes to 60 or 67. So I'm not sure if all this was thought out well, but
Someone does a group development of commercial properties, yes, they can go up to 60 to 67% that can happen now on a commercial property. The only thing you can now do is put residential units and mix that in there. Commercial developments typically require more lot coverage. And by the nature of this, you would have to do commercial and residential mixed use together. And that is, we believe we still need the higher lot coverage. We're limited by the residential density, but it allows us to get some residential units in there and also do commercial.
it also opens up the possibility that you could do 99% residential just by adding one small commercial stand. Whereas the other areas in the town are unable to do that because they don't have a wastewater treatment facility.
I think that's a fair point. I think the point of putting some type of condition on, a significant amount of commercial, it makes sense and under a true mixed-use development.
And although we're not talking about site-specific stuff, I have some serious concerns about traffic. It is extremely difficult to make a left-hand turn onto the bypass in the summer or the weekends. So with this property, any property, they're fronting on Highway 158. And heavy use, I could see people getting frustrated, making a right-hand turn and going into the Martins Point commercial area and using the commercial lots, and there is a turnaround area. I mean, I just don't see an easy way to deal with the traffic. Well, you got a whole string of lights up there. I can't see DOT putting in a light for one lot.
Well-
So again, this property will be developed and there will be some traffic issues. And I know some of that traffic is going to go into Martins Point, but I'm concerned about increasing the amount of development that could go on and making it even worse in the Martins Point commercial lots when they become a turnaround area. So it's just my thoughts on that.
It's a good point. It's a good concern. Now, that traffic will be there if we develop this and maxed out the commercial. For every residential added to that would probably mitigate some of the traffic because commercial would tend to have higher vehicular, traffic. So this would again allow some residential units to come in.
I understand your concerns completely. I mean, it's a fact of life turning, left on 158 or off of 158. But once again, I would ask that we keep our concern on the ZTA rather than the specific property.
Well, I think we can talk about specific properties. We're not talking about a specific site plan.
Right,
So
but
just talking about one of the
sure.
issues that
Yeah,
can arise
because they're all on 158.
by increasing
Yes,
density.
In a way, I also see where this, as was brought out, it's all the commercial properties, but this ZTA is really site-specific as of this point. And I understand talking about it. We're supposed to talk about the total ZTA, which we have. But the way it's written, it's site-specific. It's not written because the others can't utilize the wastewater. So it's a site-specific plan. It's just my opinion.
Well, I mean, Tony, would you strike that site-specific language and be okay with this?
I don't know whether I'd be okay with changing it at all, personally. I don't understand why suddenly, when the town of Southern Shores was, the original vision was commercial and residential, low density. I mean, that's how everything starts out. And then suddenly, it's no longer that. We're going to change what the original vision of Southern Shores is. And it's like an incremental change. The first incremental is this ZTA that is site specific. What's the next? I think there's got to be a time where you say, hey, this is the vision of Southern Shores. This is how it was written. And I don't understand why suddenly, and I understand you have to develop your lot, develop it commercially, and it would, it would fit into it. But suddenly now we want to change everything and have where we could put residents. And then, who knows what's going to happen in the future. I just think this is an incremental, it's the beginning of an incremental change. That's just my opinion. So would I be, no, I'll be right up front. No, I would not support it.
Linda, what?
I don't think it's consistent with the land use plan. I agree with Tom. And I think that's just the first opening door to other commercial properties being enabled to do other more higher density developments.
John?
Well, kind of summarize what I said before. I don't think it's fair to require an existing stormwater treatment facility. I think if this proposal is good, it should be done on all the commercial lots. If it's bad, it should be denied. I'm not in favor of it because I think it can really affect a residential group development. I mean, if the idea is if Southern Shores likes the 40% coverage, again, now somebody can put up a produce stand, call it mixed use, and you're tearing that part of the ordinance down.
Good point.
So and as Tony said in his kind of opening comments, what's the benefit? I just don't see a benefit to either Southern Shores or Martin's Point in the proposal. I mean, I respect the developer for wanting to get as much as he can. And, I know you guys do great jobs on your projects, but I just don't see a benefit in it.
Mr. Gupta, would it be a problem for you to strike the language having frontage on US 158 and or the language about existing wastewater treatment facilities? I don't believe it would make any difference for you, would it?
No.
I didn't think so. I think that striking those two is appropriate from the get-go because it's a limiting kind of thing, and it may be redundant, but it's not necessary. My familiarity with mixed-use development is not a group development. Mixed-use development is commercial on the first floor, residential above. And there's no language in this proposal that would guarantee that kind of an arrangement. Some of the others talked about a store and then residential, and you get the benefit of the higher density or the higher lot coverage. So my suggestion would be to establish some additional language that would specify that it would be all in the same building, that you couldn't have residential and only residential or only commercial, that perhaps they're in the same building, and a suggestion about appropriate lot coverage, perhaps like someone alluded to, somewhere between 40 and 60, something like that. That seems to me, that seems a little more fair. The idea of mixed use, we all know that we need more housing units, especially smaller housing units on the Outer Banks, and I think that's quite an opportunity. But As presented, I think it's got too many holes in it. You know, it would allow for, as they say, a small commercial and then large residential and sitting on a much higher footprint. So,
Ed?
Well, it's the same thing about the footprint, impervious surface, credits. We've been dealing with 30% all up to now, and now we're seeing 40 for residential. And if it's connected with commercial, it goes higher.
Well, there's two different ways. What you're speaking of is commercial on the bottom, residential up top.
mhm,
That's one way of looking at a mixed use,
mhm.
blending commercial and residential together. But you could also have an apartment building on one end of the commercial, a condominium complex on the other end of the commercial, and commercial in the middle.
Yeah.
So my concern is that there's holes in this that don't particularly spell out how you could use the mixed use. I'm not opposed necessarily to mixed use because it will afford a different residential use for apartments. And, you know, let's face it, we're 100% single family dwelling here. You know, at some point, our town has to transition a little bit more towards apartment, possibly condominium, but how do we do it? I don't know, is a mixed-use group development that this ZTA is talking about is, you know, nirvana, but it certainly, I have a concern about switching over from, if it was all residential, that you have to adhere to 40% lot coverage, to going to commercial, like John was saying, and you do 99% residential at 67% footprint, and 1% of it is commercial, then you qualify.
Perhaps there's a percentage of use and as far as square footage.
Right.
As opposed to my comment about having it all in one building.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe it's a percentage of square footage use to make sure that it's not the situation of a fruit stand and, you know, whatever. So I'm not sure where it lies.
I think Mr. Strader would like to speak, so I'm gonna let him address.
Appreciate it, Chairman. Yeah, I heard a lot of good points. I figured I would just, and there probably will be some refinement of that ZTA language, but just so that there's not anything lost in translation. It's my understanding that the reason, and there's been a lot of discussion about lot coverage, so that's what I mainly wanted to speak on. It's my understanding that multifamily housing has to adhere to that commercial building code, which pulls in all the additional lot coverage items like more parking, the loading zone, dumpster. For that reason, it adheres to the commercial building code. And it was my understanding that it would also comply with those commercial standards, which so if it's all multifamily residential housing, it's a commercial use, which would then be the 60% lot coverage. But perhaps I'm wrong about that, Wes. I don't know. And then the other topic that I heard a lot of was about the existing wastewater treatment facility. I think it says existing wastewater treatment facility. So being an engineer, I look at, we're all thinking about that Gingite Creek wastewater treatment plant. And I'm asking these questions because I'm also going to be the one refining the language. To me, the Southern Shores, the marketplace, the Southern Shores Crossing, those also have existing wastewater treatment facilities because I'm familiar with both those wastewater treatment systems. I mean, those are wastewater treatment system facilities. So I don't know that if I were in the planner's position, if that applicant brought forth the same mixed use application, if I were in Wes's shoes, I would say, okay, well, they do have an existing wastewater treatment facility. But if that's not the intent, then that's something that we need to refine our language on further.
Anybody got questions for Mr. Schrader?
Jan.
Jan?
No, I think along that line of the wastewater, for the density that you're talking about, and just for us thinking, down the road for future growth in Southern Shores, I think anything of this type of density should have a wastewater treatment. I don't think our septics are ever going to, take the capacity of building multiple units in an area. And I think, like Robert was discussing about the commercial, we could put in here a percentage of commercial. Now, it would have been very nice if you were able to put together some type of drawing of what you specifically were envisioning to put there so that we could see the type of housing and commercial. The other thought is, what about a percentage of low-income housing? In other words, if you're going to develop these areas, then let's say the developer has to put in a certain amount of low income so that we can support our teachers and our policemen and the people that need the housing. And these are just things, again, just to think about when you're looking at, developing an area. Yes, they need, a wastewater treatment plant. Okay, how much commercial can be allowed? And then how many units, and of that units, what is the percentage for low income? That's just the thought process.
Good points.
Because we need it.
Anybody else? You guys want to speak any more before we discuss this a little bit further and ask Wes some questions? Mr. Gupta?
No.
Well, Wes, I'm still struggling with if it was all residential. Is it 40% lot coverage?
Yes, sir. If it's residential, just residential.
Right, and
It's 40% lot coverage.
commercial that is residential reverts to the RSA dimensions and at this point, dimensions. And from what I see in the RS8, as it reverts back to it, is it's got, minimum lot width, minimum front yard setback, side yard setbacks, all that stuff. If it was strictly commercial, it would use the language of the RS8 for dimensions and not density at this point. Is that correct?
I think what you mean is if the development is strictly residential
Right,
in a commercial district,
right.
then it has to meet the RS8 dimensional requirements. That is correct. But the density requirement is not in the dimensional requirement.
Right.
And the next item of business on the agenda is an application from the town to fix that.
Correct.
But as to your question, residential, as it states on the screen in section 36-207 B4, it states that single-family dwellings, two-family dwellings, multifamily dwellings, and accessory buildings according to the dimensional requirements of RS8.
Yeah.
And then it also says, for multifamily dwellings, the lot coverage shall not exceed 40%. Now, earlier, the question was, well, how does a group development with residential, how do they get 60% or 67%? Because right now, I'm looking on this, what you see, this is the list of permitted uses. These are permitted uses.
Right.
What the applicant is proposing to amend or create is another use, which is a conditional use. So you would not treat it the same as a detached single-family dwelling or multifamily dwelling. Therefore, it wouldn't be subject to the 40% lot coverage. And it is what it says. It's a group development entitled to the 60% or 67%.
Do you have any idea how we could approach a ZTA like this with a percentage of commercial and residential?
I do not, and I think it would be the onus is on the applicant to produce that language.
Well, how do we like John spoke, how do we say that you can do 99% residential and adhere to the 40%? If you're using it as a group development, you get 67% lot coverage on 99% residential. It just doesn't seem right to me.
I think as Planning Board Member McClendon suggested earlier, they can come up with some sort of another condition. It could be, if they were to remove items C and D, they could create a new C that states that lot coverage shall not exceed X. And then D could state that the use or the percentage of commercial or square footage of commercial space shall not exceed X. The residential square footage shall not exceed X. I mean, I think there are many ways that they could accomplish what the concern is about. Those are just a couple that come to mind.
Any discussion on going maybe down that route for a suggested amendment to this ETA? Any thoughts?
Mr. Gupta, would it be your preference to withdraw and come back with some of the recommendations that we've made for this ZTA to make some changes, those kinds of things? Or would you rather us vote on it as it is? We're coming up with ideas as far as percentages, those kinds of things. I think we can all do some research in the meantime and see what mixed use looks like in other jurisdictions.
No, sure. I think you guys have raised some good points. It's good to get that feedback. Again, the goal initially was to really limit the property. I also understand if it's good for this property, why not for other commercial properties? I'm of that belief. I think mixing residential and commercial on these few parcels makes sense, at least in my opinion. I think putting some mix into, there has to be a minimum of X commercial would make sense. The lot coverage, just statement here, something for consideration. In most places, multifamily kind of falls under commercial as far as lot coverage. It's difficult to do a mixed-use development like this under a 60% lot coverage. Maybe consideration would be not allowed to go the density bonus of 67%, which is still a reduction from what's allowed. But yes, if I can understand, I would love to get as much input, preferably, so we can have the best approach on this next text amendment.
Okay. I just sort of want to clarify if we're discussing and debating in preparation for a vote versus something else.
Mr. Strader?
Since you're talking about how other means and methods, how other jurisdictions have tried to mesh that mixed use, something that we've seen before is the floor area ratio. And if, I don't know where this board may stand, and I'm asking because we'll have to deliberate on, well, what does it need to be heavier on? Does it need to be heavier on commercial use, or does it need to be heavier on that residential use? Because the floor area ratio of 0.5, 50% would be an even split, but we can adjust that, keep it down at 0.4, 0.6, wherever it makes sense that, because we do want to make sure that this is consistent with the land use, the land use plan.
And I think what's lacking for all of us is that, we need to be more specific about what that ratio is. I'm not comfortable with, how it's written right now. And I think it certainly needs to be examined on the points that we've made tonight about the ratio between, commercial and residential. And it's not, once again, it's not going to be site specific to this project. It's for, from what I'm hearing, there's concern about being exclusively fitting to this project with the wastewater treatment and the frontage of 158.
One other bone that I think we may want to consider offering would be to make sure that we're adhering to low impact development practices.
Sure.
We don't want to, you don't want to limit, I heard someone say, leave it at 60%, not allow them the ability to increase up to 67% with the use of those permeable pavements. However, from an engineering perspective, I think I would be wanting to encourage the use of those low impact development measures. Anyway, just
Yeah.
throw that out there.
Well, it doesn't have to be 40%, it doesn't have to be 67%, but maybe somewhere in the middle, I think would be more prudent for the town, because it is, I mean, we're going from what we don't have right now, which is commercial and residential together. And it's a big leap for the town of Southern Shores. Is it a good leap? Personally, I think it is. I think that our town is evolving, and we can't stay stagnant in how we approach residential living, to the point we need to start considering where we might possibly be able to put, some apartments, condos, townhouses, something that more people can feel like that they can use without actually owning a house. They can own an apartment, they can own a condo. Right now, we're limited to single-family residential, and I think the town is moving slowly forward. Hopefully, we are, and I'm not opposed to mixed use. I think it needs to have a lot more clarity as to what we're doing, and right now, I don't think this does it.
I got a quick question for Mike. Is there a difference with what setbacks from the canals? You got water on two sides of that property. So if under design regulations by CAMA, are they different from the way that's zoned? Like it's commercial or residential?
That use, the use doesn't matter as long as it's not a water dependent use. Yes, there's more flexibility of what you can do within that AEC. But yeah, if it's just commercial or residential, independent of that water dependent use, it doesn't have an impact.
Once again, we're trying to stay away from a specific site.
Yeah, well,
We're-
that's this, I just.
Yeah, we're not talking about waterfront, or we're talking about there's four properties that Wes has called out. The Stone Track is 7.9 acres.
That's under current zoning. A whole new planning board, a whole new town commissioners. So there could be other properties that would be rezoned
Yeah.
into commercial. So this is where we are now.
Marketplace, Southern Shores Realty Maintenance Building, that's a little over 4 acres, and theirs is netting out at about 4.5 or 8 or what have you, but
I think you brought up some really interesting, brought us an interesting new development model, and I appreciate that. And I think any carrots that you can offer that, like Jan had mentioned, a percentage of units being market rate or below market rate, to help with workforce housing, any kinds of things like that, that you can bring forward to propose for this amendment that would be beneficial to the town, that helps us feel that it is good for the town as well. Thank you.
May I ask a question
Sure.
to the board here? Currently on a commercial property, if you did all commercial, it's a group development, you can go to 67% lot coverage. And max out whatever commercial uses. So this is the option right now. I guess the idea for this is to allow residential to come into that. One is it's a negative, so what are you giving up? I personally see it as a positive in this, regardless of giving up lot coverage, every residential unit that comes into that, I believe is positive for the town. To address affordable housing, which is something we badly need. We're building right now 112 units in Kildover Hills. And we developed a property in Kildover Hills, Run Hill, which we were criticized because it wasn't affordable, but there was no tax credits or anything on that property. We built it. It's 100% leased. There are several hundred people on a waiting list there. We could have copied that exact buildings, everything, and built another development, about 100 units behind it, a property we own. We purposely redesigned it, made the units smaller. Instead of hitting an $1,800 to $2,000 price point, we're going to be starting in about $1,200 price point. There's not $1 of local or federal money in that. It was just a decision because it was the right thing to do. This property here, to take the 36 units they were talking about allowed to be mixed in here, it's very difficult. I know to bring in affordable units into this. I just want to address that to be straightforward in this right here. As much as we would love to, we're working on some stuff across the bridge and other areas, but this particular development, for the nature of it, is going to be, it's going to be luxury. It's going to be, that's what it is on this property. But it's, again, there is not a density limitation on this. We would be placing a density limitation on this, and certainly would consider some of the other things you said, but it's difficult to come down below the lot coverage allowed right now under commercial, because I feel like the residential is positive in this. But I think it's a very good point with the commercial, as far as somebody mentioning that you can do 1% commercial. I think somewhere around, 50%, and I don't know what you guys feel about that. I would love to hear your input on that, to really make it a mixed use. There needs to be a substantial commercial nature into that. It makes sense, what you're saying. As far as the other stuff about the wastewater and the highway frontage, it's just something that didn't have your input. We were trying to limit it because it's scary. That was the idea. It was like, okay, how do you make it less scary? And so we added that. We certainly can remove those conditions right there. And just trying to get a good understanding, if you guys do support this, what is some things that you would like to see?
Thank you. Just to speak to what he finished up with, when Mr. Gupta says he met with staff, he was correct. Wes and Cliff Ogburn and the mayor and myself took a couple of looks at what they were speaking to, and it was our intention informally, as we were talking about them being able to present a ZTA to our group. Our intention was to do a soft landing on possibly doing some kind of mixed use, and rather than being completely exclusive on their property, we figured that if you had to have a existing wastewater treatment plant, then other properties could certainly do it. They just would have to have an existing plan before they came before the town to ask for a mixed use. So it's something that we talked about kind of as a way to ease into this thing rather than just throw the door open all of a sudden. So that's where that came from. And it wasn't anything nefarious. It wasn't spot zoning or trying to be exclusive to their property. It was just a way of easing into this thing rather than going full bore. So I don't have a problem with being inclusive about this. So it's whatever y'all feel like as far as is taking that out of the equation tonight. But it sounds to me like we're not going to approve this tonight. We're certainly going to take a vote, but that's where that section of this ZTA came from, how it originated. So anyway, thank you. Do you have anything more for the board? We're going to.
No, thank you for your input.
Okay, thank you. Well, Wes, you've heard all the above. What, as town staff, what do you suggest for this board?
I mean, it sounds like the board is in a position to either recommend denial of the application to council. And the applicant could certainly move forward with his application to the town council for the public hearing. Even though the board's recommended denial, he still has the right to do that. Or they could withdraw it after you all recommend denial. It probably would be more appropriate to go ahead and make some sort of recommendation one way or the other. And then the applicant could withdraw before it goes to the town council and make revisions based on what you all have discussed.
So if we make a couple of recommendations tonight, but yet deny it, what happens?
When you say a couple recommendations,
Well, if the board felt that we needed to strike the, in lot,
like C and D,
item C and D.
recommend denial of it and deleting C and D?
I suppose, I mean, there's been conversation that felt like we were singling this property out.
Right, but I think if you were to recommend denial, I think it's a moot point. What was proposed.
Yeah.
So if that's what you all are inclined to do, that's what I would say should occur. And then the applicant has the right to either move forward to the town council with a public hearing as is presented, or he can withdraw it and make changes and come back. And at that time, it'll be a different ZTA.
Okay, so it sounds to me like we vote this thing up or down tonight, our board, and any suggestions that we have made tonight, I think the applicant has heard. So I don't know as we need to make a list necessarily.
Right.
You can go back and watch this on YouTube if you want and hear what we've had to say, but I think we're fairly consistent that we want more out of, more information to
Yeah.
operate out of, wouldn't you say?
Yeah, definitely. Just, Robert brought up earlier, you have the option to withdraw it at this time or we'll vote on it. So just, he did bring that up. So it's kind of up to you. It doesn't matter to me one way or the other, whatever happens. But I don't know which would be more efficient, do you think, for the applicants? Would it be more efficient to withdraw and then resubmit or vote down and?
I think that since it has come to this point, and you all have formally considered it, discussed it, my suggestion, in which you don't have to follow it, is to recommend approval or denial, and then the applicant has the choice
Okay.
of
Very
whether or
good.
not he wants to move forward.
And if the applicant does decide to withdraw it after, say, a denial, recommendation of denial, a new application can be brought forth, and it isn't in fact a new application as long as there's changes, right?
That's correct.
Yeah.
It would be a new ZTA.
And it would come back to us.
It would have to start the process over.
So I have a question, Andy.
Yes.
If we're going to vote on disallowing, is there some verbiage? In other words, lots shall be serviced by existing wastewater treatment. We were told that the other lots that were noted all have wastewater treatment facilities. If those are the only areas that are large enough to support this type of development, does that become a moot point?
The wastewater treatment facility?
Yeah.
Mr. Strader, being an engineer, he could argue one way or the other that it's a wastewater treatment facility, but with being consistent with the town's other ordinance in the utilities chapter, it refers to wastewater treatment facilities in the respect that I think what he would refer to as a plant. So I guess it's just difference in interpretation.
To your point, any mixed use should probably be on my terminology would be an engineered wastewater treatment facility. That way, it's not just an on-site conventional draining field or it's nothing like that. So I would have said, because I've been thinking that you guys were discussing, should be a regional wastewater treatment plant, should be. But I think that what your intent is that it would be serviced by an engineered wastewater treatment facility.
Okay, so having said that, then should we put in here, lot shall be serviced by an engineered wastewater treatment? In other words, are we looking at making this uniform? And then if they were to do that, then this should be in this verbiage for that.
I would think so. I mean, we had some discussion in our informal group about the nomenclature used for what Southern Shores Landing has in place that Mr. Gupta's business has bought and is in the process of bringing up to date and up to standard. But we had a couple of different languages in there, and it might be something that we need to restrict farther. I mean, I'm confused. I thought that Southern Shores, the marketplace, was a conventional septic.
That's my understanding, is that the marketplace and Southern Shores Crossing, I consider those to be septic treatment
Right.
facilities.
And to your thought, Jan, it was, we ramped it up to a wastewater treatment facility existing because it is existing.
Well, and
I guess maybe
down the
if,
road,
if-
This should be where we're headed, that it should be.
sure.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, what Wes is saying is that anything, and Mr. Strader too, anything of this magnitude would have to have a wastewater treatment facility in mixed use. So,
Engineer.
yeah, engineered.
I mean, we should have the correct verbiage.
Right,
So
and
that if this were to be done, then it should be in there.
Yeah, it should be as stringent as we can make it within,
And then the same thing with the frontage along US 158. I agree with you, pulling out on the 158 on a Saturday or Sunday, yeah,
Wow.
ridiculous. So why not a service road? Is there a way we could put a service road in any of these places that would allow the traffic to be rerouted? So it doesn't pull out on the 158. Obviously,
That's for him to-
these others already have
That's for
cut
him
through
to
service
use
roads,
to
a turning
those
lane.
things.
So again,
We can only go.
I mean, is there a way that we can put the verbiage in here that we want to safeguard, what we're, the public, and then be able to move on with a ZTA that everybody could live with?
They have to do that.
Which also would be putting in there, and that's something our thinking heads will have to realize, what is a acceptable percentage of commercial that we want in a mixed use?
well, that's,
Are we looking for more residential as town planners, or are we looking for more commercial?
or 50/50. I mean,
Exactly.
yeah. So,
Exactly. So we need to, they brought us something for us to think about and to analyze and say, okay, where are we headed?
Yeah, sure.
Because this is gonna open other doors, just like you say, and we've been a residential community, now we're gonna expand that. I'm sorry, I'm really hard on, affordable housing. So, hey, if you can't do it in this luxury, well, in order to build there, then you have to give us 20 units somewhere else. They can do it, they have the land. So, that's the only way we're gonna get affordable housing, is say, okay, we'll butter your bread, but you're gonna toast it for us. So, we gotta figure it out.
Toast it first.
well, all good points. But I think as we move forward from tonight, and like I said, the applicant has heard what our concerns are here. And I think we'll vote on this thing and move on to the next ZTA for tonight. And I would say if you start having thoughts about what might possibly need to go in the new ZTA or a revised ZTA, certainly get them to Wes, because I'm sure the applicant will be working with town staff to reinvigorate this ZTA to what they've heard tonight. So anyway, I'd like to go ahead and get a motion on passing this ZTA in its present form.
Yeah, I'd like to make I would like to make a motion to deny the ZTA in its current form and be resubmitted with, if the applicant so desires, at a future date with some of the items discussed this evening.
A second.
Ed, seconds, thank you. Any discussion beyond what we've had already? Anybody? Okay, I'm gonna call a vote. All in favor of denying ZTA 2202, please raise your hand, say aye.
Right.
Aye. Opposed? None seen. ZTA denied.
Just for the record, just said this before, wouldn't the proper motion be to recommend denial? I mean, we're not denying anything.
No, we're recommending denial. You're
Right,
correct.
Yeah,
You are correct.
yeah, good point.
So I could amend that to say I am recommending the denial of ZTA 2202 in its current form, and the applicant has the ability to resubmit at a future date.
Ed, still second
I
that?
still say.
Thank you.
Everyone still in favor? Aye. Okay. Next item on our agenda, I can find it. Is ZTA 2204. Wes, I'll get you to tell us why we're looking at this.
Yes, sir. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. The next item on the agenda is ZTA-2204, which is an application from the town, and it is a request to amend Section 36-207B4. These proposed amendments are being proposed by staff to establish a maximum density of 8 dwelling units per acre in the C General Commercial District. Currently, Section 36-207B4 establishes that detached single-family dwellings, two-family dwellings, multifamily dwellings, and accessory buildings are permitted in the C General Commercial District according to the dimensional requirements of the RS8 multifamily residential district. The dimensional requirements of the RS8 district are established in Section 36-203D, and they address yards, which are setbacks, lot coverage, lot width, building height, et cetera, but they do not establish density, and this was mentioned in the previous agenda item. The density requirement for the RS8 district is established in Section 36-203A at 8 dwelling units per acre, which should also be required for residential development in the C General Commercial District. Staff feels that this was most likely an oversight when the language was written. With respect to the town's land use plan, we do find that it's consistent with policy number 2 and that it is consistent with the town's currently adopted land use plan, and town staff recommends approval of the proposed ZTA.
Thank you, Wes. Anybody have any questions for Wes on this?
I just have one question, Wes, and I don't remember where I read it today. Is there a 5-acre minimum requirement for something for concerning commercial and putting residential units on it?
Not that comes to mind at the moment.
I read something today and I, unfortunately, when I wrote my notes, I missed it.
It was a planned unit development.
Planned unit development. Okay,
That makes sense.
Yeah,
okay.
5 acres.
5 acres, okay. It has nothing to, okay.
Currently, Wes, we have, I wrote it down on the back of something, but the properties that are in RS8 and even RS10 were, help me out here, I wrote it down.
Yes, sir. I'll show you. Let's see.
I got it.
On the zoning map here. RS10, I believe, is Pelican Watch. Hang on, let's see.
No, RS8 was Pelican Watch.
RS8 is Pelican Watch.
RS10 is Mallard Cove
Yes.
and Southern Shores Landing.
Right. So the only RSA we have at this point is Pelican Watch.
Yeah. And there's no PUD development in Southern Shores currently.
Not being proposed. I believe Mallard Cove was approved as a planned unit development,
Right.
but I'm not aware of any being proposed at the moment.
Does that have a central sewer?
It has some sort of septic wastewater treatment facility. It's not a wastewater treatment plant similar to Southern Shores
Well,
Landing.
one facility services all.
It's a septic, yes, it's a type of septic. Yeah.
Well, if we're looking at the RS8, what is it? 36203. Can you pull that up?
Yes, sir.
In the intent, the RS8 district is established as an area in which the principal use of land is for high-density residential purposes, not to exceed 8 dwelling units per net acre. Net acre,
Correct.
correct?
That would be the usable area.
Right. And then anything in a mixed use group development, meaning residential and commercial, if residential use is used in the commercial district, it reverts back to the dimensional requirements, which is minimum lot size, lot width, minimum front yard, minimum side yard setbacks, and so on. It has, what I'm confused about is item 6 under the dimensional requirements. It has a maximum allowable lot coverage by principal use and all accessory structures at 30%. What does that mean? When we were saying it was 40%
Yeah.
somewhere else.
Section 36-207 states that multifamily dwellings are 40%. So this would tell me that 30% would apply to single-family duplexes, but not multifamily.
Okay. So it excludes multifamily. And, you know, just to reiterate what we were talking about before, if a commercial property was all residential and no commercial.
That's if a property, if they wanted to propose a duplex building, it would be subject to 30%. If they
Right.
were to propose multifamily, one building, 40%.
Right. 1% commercial,
Yeah.
Well,
Right.
however, though, I mean,
then it goes to 67%.
it goes without saying, though, now we don't currently allow group development of residential and commercial. So that question, I mean,
Yeah,
it's,
so far,
it's either residential or commercial.
correct.
Yes, sir.
Okay, anybody else have any concerns about 3 words in the ZTA. They're pretty much needed, in my opinion, to clarify what Wes has probably deemed as correct, that it was an oversight, that it was not put in here in 1981, probably, who knows? But does anybody have any concerns about moving forward with this ETA? Yes. Okay. The word "the" is underlined. We're okay with that. Well, I would entertain a motion to approve ZTA 22-04 as written.
I'll make a motion to approve ZTA 2204 as written.
Second.
I've got a question for Wes here real quick. Do we need a finding of consistency in the motion?
If you're recommending approval or denial of the, in this case, if the motion is to recommend approval, the statement of consistency is found in Article 4, Article 4 of the ZTA in the ordinance. Therefore, if they're recommending approval of the ZTA, that is part of it,
Okay, thank
included.
you.
And then also, once again, as Mr. Finelli pointed out, recommendation to the town council is what the vote should focus on.
You satisfied with that, John?
Yes, I am.
Okay, thanks. Okay, so got a motion and a second. Any discussion? All in favor of the motion, say aye. Aye. Opposed? None? We recommend sending that to town council, approved by us. Okay. Public comment one more time. Anybody signed up? Anybody want to speak? Mr. Gupta, one more chance? Okay. Yeah, sure.
This just is a point of procedure. So if you're the planning board and you get the ZTA that you proposed, you are able to strike things from it and then send it to the town council, but you can't add conditions or change the conditions to the proposed ZTA. As the planning board.
Wes, I'll let you.
They can recommend suggested language if they wanted to do so.
And they would be recommended to the town council or?
They are making a recommendation. The planning board is an advisory board. They offer advisory decisions to the town council, which would be in the form of a recommendation of approval, disapproval. And they can recommend denial, approval, or approval with changes. And in a lot of cases, actually, when it's ZTA is submitted by town staff, in a lot of cases, they do suggest new language. But typically, when a third party other than, a party other than the town applies, it's not very common for the board to recommend approval with changes. So the onus would go back to the applicant is what I would say.
That answer your question?
Yeah.
Okay, thank you for asking. Okay, planning board comments, start down this way. Robert?
None.
No.
All right, Wes, do you have any announcements for us?
Yes, sir. The next meeting is May 19th, and Ms. LeBlanc, her ZTA will be on the agenda. She's submitting an application for a text amendment. I was worried that you were thinking that it was on the agenda tonight. I was like, I hope. So I remember, we spoke about that because you said you were going to be out of town, and
The process.
I got you. I understand. So at this point, that's the only item I have for the agenda. We will see if ZTA 2108 signage shows up. I'm still not sure. Another item to announce is the town council at their April 5th meeting, they had approved the ZTAs that you all had previously recommended approval of, the lot coverage. With respect to lot coverage, it was the other version of the lot coverage. They also recommended, or they did approve the solid waste ordinance amendments. And that is now in the books. And this coming Friday, when we do our biweekly newsletter, we're going to include information in there about what that ordinance does, what's new in that ordinance, and try to hopefully start to get the word out. And it's going to be an educational effort to get everybody up to speed, I think.
Well, we've done our best, Tony, or for now, anyway.
For now. Wes, on the education aspect, I know you were doing the newsletter. Are there going to be how are you going to proceed with the education aspect other than the newsletter? Just curious.
Right now, so right now the plan is to this weekend or Friday is to include the changes to the ordinance, notify, try to get the word out, notify what is a violation now that used to not be a violation. We also want to send information to our realty companies that do business in the town.
Okay.
And we've already, the town, I don't know, some of you may have noticed that there's stickers have been applied to your receptacles. I'm not sure how far Public Works has gotten in the town, but we did have the stickers printed. I think I've told you all before. And Public Works is going out and affixed them to recycling and solid waste receptacles in an effort to educate. So we're going to do what we can, do our best, hopefully.
Okay, thanks. I was just curious what the next step was.
Okay, any more announcements?
That's it, Mr. Chairman. Thank you.
I'm going to adjourn.
Make a motion. I make a motion that we adjourn.
I'll second and hit the hammer.
You were quick.
Thanks for reminding me, Tony.